Hello, my name's Sour and welcome to the video. I really do hope you enjoy this. Now please, enjoy the video, make sure you like and subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you want to see any more, and whether or not you want this to become a monthly thing that I do for you. Now please, enjoy. While the mechanic of Hexproof has been around since Portal 3 Kingdoms, it actually didn't become a keyword until Duels of the Planeswalkers 2012. What Hexproof does, it allows you not to be the target or the card that you're having the Hexproof on, not be the target of any spells or abilities your opponents may or may not cast or control. The only real way to get rid of creatures that are on the battlefield that have this ability is to have abilities that affect the entire table, such as sacrifice, exile, and damage, but has to affect every single creature on the battlefield and not one specific target. A good example of this is, say if you have Cigar-Fallen Blessings out along with Fireman Commando. In order for an opponent to take out Fireman Commando, they have to use a spell like Roar of Ravnica that'll take out everyone's creatures on the battlefield through exile, or you can take out Cigar-Fallen Blessings since it does not have Hexproof in order to take out Fireman Commando without worrying about the Hexproof. Now there's many ways to take it out, it just depends on what you're trying to do on the battlefield and what the situation is you're currently in. Being around since Alpha, First Strike shares the title of oldest mechanic along with Deathtouch, Hexproof, and a few others. It is one of 19 evergreen abilities that have become a solid baseline in all the Magic. What First Strike does, it allows you to do damage to a creature before the other creature is able to do damage to you. Meaning, if you have one creature blocking another, that means the person who has the first strike on their creature will be able to do damage before the creature is able to do any damage. For example, if you take Knight of the White Orchard and Blood Cursed Knight. Now say you have Knight of the White Orchard defending and gets Blood Cursed Knight. Since Knight of the White Orchard has first strike, it'll be able to do its damage first. It's the same in terms of attacking as well. As long as the Knight of the White Orchard has first strike, it's able to do its damage first, whether it's defending or attacking. Now, if you have something that's way bigger than Knight of the White Orchard and it survives, then the creature will be able to do its damage after the Knight of the White Orchard does its damage. Now, say you have two creatures with first strike, both of them will be able to do their damage at the same exact time, meaning it'll just go back to regular combat. A good way to defend against this is obviously have something that's bigger that will be able to survive an attack from the person from first strike, or have those instants of sorceries at the ready that'll be able to take it out before you attack or able to do it at instant speed so you have nothing to worry about. Indestructible is granted in some form in Alpha with Consecrated Land and in Arabian Nights with Guardian Beast. Indestructible did not become an actual mechanic until Darksteel, where they had to make it an actual ability due to confusion amongst the rules because there was no actual rules that really did set a actual standard of how the ability worked. Since then though, Indestructible has become an evergreen ability, meaning it's one of 19 that actually shows up in every single set. What Indestructible does, it allows you to ignore the destroy part of many abilities, meaning the only way to actually take out a card with Indestructible would be through sacrifice or exile. Creatures with Indestructible make very good offensive and defensive creatures, but if you are going against them, make sure you are running exile and sacrifice in your decks so you're able to take them out as soon as possible so they do not become a problem on the battlefield. While the concept of Shroud was first introduced in Legends on only one card, which is known as Spectral Cloak, it didn't actually become a key word until Future Sight. Shroud used to be an evergreen ability, but was eventually replaced by Hexproof, due to it being obsolete compared to Hexproof. The last time this mechanic was seen, it was in Dustborn Commander, which was printed on Lightning Greaves. Ever since then, we are yet to see it appear into another set. What this ability does, it allows a creature not to be the target of any spells or abilities. But the difference between these two, Hexproof and Shroud, is that it cannot be targeted by anyone, including yourself, unlike Hexproof, where it only targets your opponents. This means that if you want to use Shroud as an ability for a creature, you have to put on everything that you want to do before you put on the Shroud, or else you will not be able to do it, and that creature will be stuck with whatever it has at the current time you do place that ability on. Like Hexproof, the best way to defend and fight against this ability is to have blanket abilities that affect the entire battlefield. While it was rejected at first when it was introduced in the first You Make Your Own Card promotion that Wizards ever held, since the mechanic didn't really fit within the color green which was introduced with, the mechanic was eventually adopted by Wizards because the community liked it so much that it needed to be part of the game. It was later on launched with Legions on cards Ridgetop Raptor and Rock Shard Elemental. And almost immediately after its introduction, it was inducted into Evergreen ability, meaning it will be in every single set you see. Now, with this ability, it's not going to be on any common cards except for one. It was only really seen on cards of higher rarity, such as rare, mythics, or maybe from time to time uncommons. What Double Strike is two first strikes stacked on top of each other, meaning there's going to be one first strike phase and there's going to be additional first strike phase, meaning double the damage for no cost at all. The real way to defend against this is just basically having a creature that's bigger and tougher, or have those removable abilities at the ready so you can take out the creature before it becomes a problem at all. Being recently introduced in Dustmore and only be printed on 17 cards, Eerie is a triggered ability that triggers whenever you play an enchantment or you fully unlock a room. Meaning it pairs great, especially when you play with the new room cards were also introduced in Dustmore, or if you pair it with a Zerd the Enchanter, which allows you to go search for an enchantment that costs 3 or less and put onto the battlefield whenever it attacks. It'll trigger every time you do put an enchantment onto the battlefield. A great example of Eerie going to effect is with Scrabbling Skullcrab. What it says is whenever you put an enchantment onto the battlefield or you unlock a room, target opponent mills 2 cards. And this happens every single time you fully unlock a room or you play an enchantment, meaning the more enchantments you get onto the battlefield or the more rooms you unlock, the more you're making the player mill. Being first released in Dustmore and only being printed on 30 cards, what Rooms allows you to do is that you can pay either half of the card before you cast it out. When you cast it out, you'll be able to get the ability of the enchantment of the half that you paid for. And in order to get the second ability that is on the other half, then you'll have to pay the cost of that side in order to get it. But this will have to be at sorcery speed in order to unlock that ability. Now this enchantment subtype goes hand in hand with Eerie, which allows you to trigger Eerie's ability whenever you cast an enchantment or you fully unlock a room, which, depending on the ability of the Eerie that is being held, it will trigger every time you unlock a room. Now with rooms, there are many sub-rules that go along with it, which goes through unlocking, casting either halves or anything like that, which I'll go over in another video that will be released in the future. Being introduced in Dustmore and being a variant of Manifest and being printed on 34 cards, this ability allows you to look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 colorless creature, and the other one goes into the graveyard. You can turn up the other card that's face down on the battlefield at any time for its mana cost if it is a creature. This mechanic is good, especially when it comes to the graveyard, and it also feeds into another mechanic called Delirium that was also introduced in Dustmore. This ability comes in great, especially when you're trying to get through your library and find the cards you need in order to win the game and finding all your pieces. First making its way into Shroud of Innistrad and then making its last appearance in Modern Horizons 3, Delirium is being reintroduced back into Dustmore House of Horrors. With this mechanic, you want cards in your graveyard, more specifically 4 or more different types of cards in your graveyard. And if this is the case, and you have the card that says Delirium on it, you gain an ability that is specified on the card. This ability pairs up very well with Manifest Dread, as with Manifest Dread, you are putting at least 1 card per turn into your graveyard. So if you were to build a deck solely relying on both Manifest Dread and Delirium, it could be a very dangerous combination for your opponents to face against. Released in Duskmoor, this effect states that if that card is tapped, it gains a certain ability. Pretty straightforward and simple. But there's a catch though, it only happens at the beginning of your second main phase. For those new to the game and don't know how to move through your turn, it is separated into phases. In the simplest form, it goes from upkeep to main phase, to combat phase, to your end phase or your second main phase, and then to your end step. It is at your second main phase or your end phase where this ability goes into effect. This ability is good especially if you're trying to combo off of things or you're trying to achieve a thing in your deck that will win you the game. First released in Zendikar and then making its last appearance in Modern Horizons 3 as of right now, this ability states that whenever a land enters the battlefield, you gain an ability. And this is not limited to just basic lands. It goes for any type of land that is in the game. It will trigger this ability and will gain that ability. And there are also many spells and abilities that allow you to gain lands through your library onto the battlefield tapped. Meaning if you build this deck correctly and efficient enough, you will be taking full advantage of the game through just lands. And it doesn't have to be you who plays that spell to get to the land. If your opponent plays a spell that allows you to get a land from your library underneath your control, it still counts, it still triggers off this ability, as long as a land gets under your control on your battlefield. While the concept of Deathtouch was introduced back in Alpha with Cockatrice and Thicket Basilisk, it didn't become an actual keyword mechanic until Future Sight with Thornwielded Archer, making it the first creature with Deathtouch implemented to the card. Since then, Deathtouch has become an evergreen ability, meaning it's one of 19 that shows up in almost every single set that Wizards releases. That means no matter what, you will see this ability at some point during your gameplay. Your opponents could be using it to gain advantage in the game, or you may be using it yourself to gain the advantage in the game as well. What this ability does is that no matter how much damage you do to a creature, it will be enough to destroy that creature, meaning no matter what the damage is, it's an instant destruction of the card. An example is, it doesn't matter if your creature's a 1/1 and the other creature's a 6/6. That 1/1, even though it just does 1 damage to that creature, it will be enough to destroy that creature. But now, it is way around Deathtouch though. If you have a creature like First Strike will take priority over the Deathtouch, meaning that if the First Strike hits and destroys the creature, Deathtouch does not go into effect and you will not destroy the creature you're blocking or defending. Released in Duskmoor, when it comes to Impending, you gotta look at it as time counters. So when you cast a creature out for the Impending cost, you're gonna have Impending counters on the creature, or if it's simpler terms, time counters. The only way to remove these counters is at each end step, meaning the longer you have to cast the creature out on the battlefield for its Impending cost, the faster you're gonna have those counters off. The amount of counters you're going to have on a creature is already predetermined alongside its cost. This is a great way to cheat out big creatures such as Overlord of the Mistmoors. When he enters or attacks, you get to create 2/2/1 white insect creature tokens with flying every time he does attack or enters the battlefield. Or another example is Overlord of the Boil Bilges, that does 4 damage to any target whenever it enters or attacks. Making their debut in Encore Lair Behemoths and making its last appearance on March of the Machines Multiverse Legends. Companion is an additional card you can have in your sideboard that if you choose, you can pay 3 mana to put into your hand and treat as any other card. You also have to reveal this companion at the beginning of the game as if you do with leyline cards. The main premise behind this mechanic is to have an idea of what you're going to build your deck around in order to take advantage of it so you can get all the possible advantages from this card as you can. For example, with Lords of the Dream Den, its requirement is that each permanent card in your starting deck has a converted mana cost of 2 or less. The main reason behind this is that its secondary ability states that during each of your turns, you may cast one permanent spell with converted mana cost of 2 or less from your graveyard. Making its debut in Commander Legends and last being seen in Modern Horizons 3, Commander, Encore focuses on exile and exile from your graveyard. What it essentially does is that when you exile a creature from your graveyard, you get to create a token copy of that creature for each opponent that you have. It will gain haste. Each individual copy will attack those individual opponents. Then at the beginning of your next end step, you will have to sacrifice these tokens, and you only activate this ability at sorcery speed, meaning you can only activate it on your turn. A good example of this is with Bloodmade Tyrant. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. So when this creature dies and you exile for its Encore cost, you essentially get 3 Bloodmade Tyrants plus 3 additional 5/5 red flying dragon creature tokens as well. In other words, that's a whole lot of dragon coming your way. So far, only making an appearance in Murders of Karlov Manor and Murders of Karlov Manor Commander, this enchantment subtype is specifically made for this set. The case is split off into 3 parts. The part where you get when you immediately cast this enchantment, the part that you need to solve in order to get to the solved part of this enchantment, and then the solved part, the ability you get after you solve the to solve section of this enchantment. Once a case is solved, it can never be unsolved until it leaves the battlefield, and if you make a copy of this enchantment, you'll have to solve that solve part again for that copy. It does not carry over into the copies. And with the to solve ability, you have to meet the conditions, but if you don't meet them by the beginning of your next end step, it will immediately turn to solve, and it will stay solved until it leaves the battlefield. First released in Addison Restored, last seen in Dustmore, and about to make another appearance in Innistrad Remastered. Miracle is the ability that lets you cheat on cards, and it was the first card that you drew during that turn. Because if you draw it first, it has a miracle cost on it, it usually is about half, if not a quarter cheaper than the actual cost of the card. And this happens anytime you draw your first card on any turn. It acts as an instant speed ability for your cards, especially the creature cards. Meaning if your opponent plays a card that lets you draw a card during their turn, and it has a miracle cost and you have the mana to pay for it, you can instantly cast that card on their turn at instant speed. Even though this ability has been around for a while now, it's still not an evergreen mechanic because of its clunkiness in gameplay, and especially in tournaments. This ability is also printed on a handful of cards, so it's not like it's printed on a whole bunch of cards as of right now. A couple examples of cards that I printed on is Sister Repentia and Revenge of the Haunted. First released in March of the Machine and making its return in Innistrad Remastered. Each battle comes with Siege. What Siege does is it allows you to choose an opponent to protect it, while you and other opponents attack it. Once it is defeated, you can bring back onto the battlefield underneath your control, transformed. So with this ability, you can destroy, you get a creature, enchantment, or whatever the transformation is on the back of the card. The amount of damage you need to do to this card is depicted down in the bottom right corner of the card. Much like Planeswalkers, it can only be taken damage, it cannot dish out any damage itself. The cost to bring it back out to the battlefield transformed is nothing. Once this is destroyed, it gets exiled and runs automatically back into the battlefield, transformed underneath your control. Being released back in Commander 2017 and making another return in Innistrad Remastered, Eminence mainly focuses on being present in your command zone and on the battlefield. Since that's the main focus of this mechanic, that means if you have your legendary creature in either of these zones, you gain a special ability that can only be gained when it's in either of these zones. While this ability can be used in both Limited, Constructed, and Commander, it mainly flourishes in Commander format, since with Commander, you choose a quote-unquote commander for your deck, meaning it'll be in the command zone and on the battlefield at any point in time throughout the game, meaning you're always gaining its effect. A good example of this ability is with the Dragon. When you have an Dragon in your command zone on the battlefield, dragons cost 1 less to cast, meaning that you have more dragons on the battlefield sooner, and with its secondary ability, the more dragons you have, the more often its secondary ability is going to pop off, meaning the more permanents you can just put onto the battlefield without paying its mana cost. And that essentially rolls up 2024. man, I can say it's been a really good year. Now, I may not have that many subscribers and my views might also be down, but this is actually something that I'm really enjoying now. Like, the more I do this, the more I'm able to actually dive into something I don't know and actually learn from it, and probably excel from it as well. Now, in terms of future videos, let me think of like part 3 of diving into the rulebook. That's been very much on the back burner recently, just due to time that I have available to me. And I also got something else cooking up as well. I may be starting to dive into the history of actual cards, specific cards within the Magic universe, or maybe even the history or even the lore behind any specific sets. Now, that'll be something that I have to decide on the back end of things, but mainly the main thing that's really going to be coming out is more of these shorts that I've been making. And honestly, thinking about it now, I'm going to have to start making 2025's compilation like now, because now we got an entire year. So I think this video is long. It's going to be very much longer in terms of next year. But shoot, I'm already thinking about it. It's like, damn. Also, I'm thinking about doing the compilation every single month as well. It's like, might as well. Like, hey, it gives me a good placeholder. I can actually go back and look at these videos as I put this together and re-record some lines, and actually see what the progress I have with these videos. Now, that's all I have for you this last video of 2024. Now, my name's Sour. See you all in the next one. Happy New Year, and see you in 2025. Later.